My stepson spent the whole night with me behind his father's wall. The evenings had become a predictable ritual of shadows and silence. But that night, something was different. A subtle electricity in the air. A feeling I hadn't known in years. It began with the faintest awareness. A soft spark ignited by his presence. The house was still, the muffled sounds of George's steady breathing drifting through the walls, while the warmth of Liam's body beside me on the couch drew every nerve in my being to attention. For 20 years, this home had been a sanctuary of routine. My days were a carousel of schedules, conversations about the weather, and the gentle rustle of habit. Liam had always been part of that rhythm, first as a boy eager for my approval and later as a man who carried himself with quiet confidence. Over time, he had become a fixture in our lives, a presence I had come to take for granted, until recently. Now, when he entered the room, it was as though the air shifted to accommodate him. The sound of his footsteps on the stairs sent a shiver up my spine. His voice held a timbre I couldn't ignore, and his gaze lingered. That evening, with George retired to bed early, I stayed up to indulge in the solitude of the living room, only to find myself joined by him. Liam settled into the space beside me, his closeness awakening a pulse beneath my skin I had long forgotten. His athletic frame, clad in a simple shirt and joggers, exuded vitality. He smelled faintly of soap and something earthy, clean and reassuring yet alluring. My eyes trailed to his hands as they rested lightly on his knees, strong and capable, with veins faintly visible beneath the surface. We didn't speak, not at first. There was no need. The silence was full of unspoken things, the weight of a moment suspended in time. My senses were heightened, the heat radiating from him, the subtle shift of his breath, the slight motion of his chest as he exhaled. When his hand brushed mine, it was an accident, or perhaps fate, a fleeting touch that sent a ripple through my body. I froze, uncertain if he had noticed my sharp intake of breath, but when I glanced at him, his eyes were already on me. His expression was unreadable, yet there was something in it that made my stomach tighten. I should have stood, made an excuse, left the room to preserve the fragile lines of decency. But I stayed. His presence felt magnetic, drawing me closer without a single word spoken. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, every detail of our closeness replaying in my mind. My skin tingled with a memory I couldn't suppress, a quiet, undeniable awakening of something buried deep within me. A whisper of desire, dangerous and thrilling, impossible to ignore. The weight of his gaze lingered long after the moment had passed, a subtle warmth that seemed to settle just beneath my skin. I couldn't forget the brush of his hand against mine, the way his breath had stirred the air between us. That night, as the house descended into stillness, the pull of his presence seemed to echo in the quiet. When he returned later, his steps soft and unhurried, I was still in the living room, caught between the pages of a book I wasn't truly reading. He entered with the quiet confidence that always marked his movements, a water bottle in hand, his hair damp from a recent shower. There was something intoxicating about his ease, the way he existed in his own rhythm, unaware of the effect it had on me. He sat beside me, closer this time, the distance between us nearly erased. The space we occupied felt charged, heavy with unspoken possibilities. I kept my eyes on the words in front of me, but my body was acutely aware of his, the heat radiating from his skin, the subtle scent of soap mingled with something deeper, warmer. When he shifted slightly, the edge of his thigh brushed mine. A small gesture, one that might have been accidental, but it sent a ripple through me, like the sudden pull of a wave dragging me into unknown waters. My breathing slowed, every sense attuned to the moment. I didn't move, didn't flinch, but the silence around us thickened. The touch came next, tentative yet deliberate, a light stroke along the back of my hand, his fingers barely grazing the skin. The sensation was like fire and silk, delicate but powerful enough to leave an impression. My heart quickened as his hand lingered, his palm warm as it settled over mine, pressing lightly. My body responded before my mind could catch up. The subtle arch of my spine, the way my fingers curled against his. It was as though my skin had awakened, every nerve reaching toward him, desperate to prolong the connection. I felt the roughness of his fingertips as they slid upward, tracing a slow, deliberate path along my wrist, then pausing at the tender curve of my forearm. The world around us seemed to fall away. There was only the hum of my pulse, the intoxicating sensation of his touch, and the quiet intimacy of being seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. My chest rose and fell with unsteady breaths, my body trembling with the realization that this was happening, not in my mind but here now beneath the dim light of the living room. His hand moved with a reverence that left me breathless, his fingers exploring my skin as if memorizing every detail. My heart raced and I knew with absolute clarity that there was no turning back. Whatever boundaries had existed between us, they had already dissolved, leaving only the raw, undeniable pull of something we couldn't resist. The moment stretched, fragile and unyielding, as his touch ignited a heat that coursed through me. There was no sound but the quiet rhythm of our breaths, his soft and steady, mine uneven, betraying the storm building inside. His hand lingered on my skin, as though testing the bounds of my resolve, tracing slow, deliberate paths that left an electric trail behind. I could feel his presence shift, drawing nearer, the space between us shrinking until it felt as though even the air held its breath. My pulse quickened as his fingertips grazed the edge of my shoulder, their warmth slipping beneath the loose neckline of my shirt. A shiver rippled through me, delicate yet consuming, and my eyes fluttered shut against the intensity of the sensation. Every nerve in my body seemed to hum, alive in a way I hadn't known in years. His touch was gentle yet confident, his movements unhurried as if he wanted to savor every moment, every inch of me. My thoughts blurred, reduced to nothing but the acute awareness of his hands, one cradling my arm, the other venturing farther, sliding across the curve of my collarbone with agonizing slowness. The air around us thickened, a quiet tension that resonated between our bodies like a shared secret. I could feel his breath now warm against my temple, the faintest hint of salt and sweetness clinging to his skin. A tremor passed through me as his lips brushed against the edge of my jaw, so faint it might have been imagined, but the searing heat it left behind was undeniably real. I didn't move, didn't pull away. Instead, I found myself leaning toward him, my body betraying a need that had lain dormant for too long. My fingers, trembling but determined, found their way to the planes of his chest. His skin was firm beneath the thin fabric of his shirt, and I could feel the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath my palm. The boundaries of caution dissolved entirely as his hands shifted, one moving to the small of my back, the other tangling gently in my hair. The sensation was overwhelming, a flood of warmth that spread through me as he drew me closer, his movements deliberate but achingly restrained. Time seemed to slow, every moment stretched and intensified as though the universe conspired to trap us here, in this fragile and electric now. His lips found mine, tentative at first, their softness a question more than a statement. But when I didn't pull away, when I instead tilted toward him, answering with my own yearning, the kiss deepened, its slow, deliberate rhythm stealing my breath and scattering what remained of my composure. I could feel his hands explore further, their warmth anchoring me as I surrendered to the heady pull of the moment. My body responded instinctively, drawn to the solidity of him, to the heat and strength that seemed to radiate from every touch. His fingers slipped beneath the edge of my shirt, skimming the sensitive skin at my waist, and my breath caught as a wave of sensation surged through me. I hadn't realized how deeply starved I'd been for this, for the electric intimacy of touch, the quiet vulnerability of being truly seen and wanted. My hands roamed across his shoulders, his back, learning the contours of him as though I might commit them to memory. The quiet hum of his breath against my skin, the way his body curved toward mine. It was a symphony of sensations, each note more intoxicating than the last. There was no room for thought, no space for doubt or regret. The past, the future, everything beyond this moment had fallen away, leaving only the burning present and the impossible closeness of him. I felt as though I had been swept into a tide, carried by a force greater than either of us, and I didn't want it to end. The walls of the house seemed to fade into obscurity, the familiar surroundings dissolving into shadows and soft light. His hands on my skin were all that remained, their warmth anchoring me in a world that felt utterly foreign and impossibly vivid. Every movement, every touch seemed deliberate, like he was exploring not just my body but the unspoken desires I had buried for years. His fingers grazed the curve of my waist, a tender yet purposeful exploration that sent ripples through me. It was as though his touch awakened something dormant, something I hadn't realized was still there. My body arched instinctively toward him, a silent plea I couldn't contain, and the soft exhale of his breath against my ear was an answer, quiet but absolute. The fabric of my shirt slipped away with ease, the cool air brushing against my newly exposed skin. Yet, even that coolness felt secondary to the fire his touch left in its wake. His hands moved as if guided by instinct, pausing just long enough to make me feel seen, appreciated in a way I hadn't felt in years. When his lips found the hollow of my neck, I gasped softly, the sensation as intoxicating as it was overwhelming. The softness of his mouth contrasted with the firmness of his hands, creating a delicate tension that built with each passing second. My heart raced, its beat loud and erratic, drowning out the whispers of reason that had long since faded into the background. His shirt was the next barrier to fall, the thin fabric sliding away to reveal the hard planes of his chest. My hands moved without thought, tracing the contours of him, marveling at the contrast between the strength of his body and the gentleness of his touch. The heat of his skin beneath my fingertips was a revelation, a reminder of how alive I could still feel. Our breaths mingled in the quiet space between us, the air thick with an unspoken understanding. His hands slipped lower, exploring the soft curve of my hips, the delicate press of his fingers igniting sensations that radiated through me like a slow-burning flame. My own touch grew bolder, mapping the expanse of his shoulders, the dip of his back, the strength in his arms. There was no rush, no urgency to our movements. Each moment felt suspended, a perfect fragment of time that neither of us dared to break. The way his body moved against mine was almost reverent, as though this connection was something to be cherished rather than conquered. When he lifted me, his arms steady and sure, I felt weightless in his embrace. The bed beneath me was soft, but it was his presence that grounded me, his body a source of both comfort and exhilaration. His touch became more deliberate, his hands moving with purpose yet never losing their gentleness. My skin seemed to come alive under his touch, every nerve alight with a mixture of pleasure and anticipation. I felt the soft press of his lips against my collarbone, the way his breath warmed the sensitive surface of my skin. My hands found his face, tracing the lines of his jaw, the curve of his lips, as though committing every detail to memory. The world beyond us ceased to exist. There was only this moment, this connection that felt both fragile and unbreakable. His movements were unhurried, each touch building on the last, the sensations growing in intensity until they seemed to blur the lines between our bodies. I didn't just feel him against me. I felt him everywhere, a presence that consumed and completed me all at once. Time slipped away, leaving only the rhythm of our breaths, the warmth of his skin, and the quiet realization that nothing else mattered. The boundaries between us had disappeared, replaced by a closeness I had thought impossible, a closeness I never wanted to end. The air around us seemed charged, alive with an energy I could neither name nor control. His hands were warm and steady, moving over me with a reverence that sent shivers cascading across my skin. There was a language in his touch, unspoken but deeply understood, and with every brush of his fingertips, I felt myself unravel. His body hovered above mine, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. Yet he lingered, as if savoring the moment before the inevitable. My breath caught as his lips grazed the delicate curve of my shoulder, leaving behind a warmth that bloomed and spread. The softness of his mouth was a contrast to the firmness of his grip on my waist, the juxtaposition igniting sensations that swept through me like waves. I reached for him, my fingers tracing the lines of his back, the taut muscles shifting beneath his skin. The strength in his body was undeniable, yet his movements were unhurried, as if time itself had paused to allow us this stolen night. Every inch of him felt deliberate, purposeful, and as I explored his form, I marveled at the way he responded, his breath hitching at my touch. His lips found the hollow at the base of my throat, and I arched instinctively toward him, my body betraying a need I could no longer contain. He moved slowly, deliberately, his breath trailing along my collarbone, his hands never still. They slid over the curve of my hips, grazing the softness of my thighs, his touch leaving a path of fire and anticipation in its wake. I could feel the rhythm of his breathing, the steady rise and fall of his chest against mine. Each exhale a soft warmth that whispered across my skin. My fingers tangled in his hair, guiding him closer, my body answering his in ways that words never could. There was a tenderness in the way he moved, a care that both soothed and inflamed the storm building within me. The room seemed to dissolve around us, the world outside fading into insignificance. All that mattered was the connection, the electric pull that bound us in a way that felt both thrilling and forbidden. His hands found my back, pulling me against him, and the sensation of his strength surrounding me was intoxicating. I clung to him, my senses overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of it all. His lips traveled lower, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he sought to memorize every inch of me. My skin seemed to hum beneath his touch, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years, each caress leaving behind a heat that pooled deep within me. My breaths came in shallow bursts, each one an involuntary response to the way he moved, the way he explored me with an intimacy that felt endless. I pressed closer, needing to feel him fully, completely, the barriers between us dissolving with every passing second. The weight of his body, the heat of his skin, the firmness of his hands, they all converged into a symphony of sensations that left me breathless. Time became irrelevant, the only measure of its passing the slow, steady rhythm of our movements, the quiet exhalations that filled the room. As the night stretched on, I felt myself give in completely, surrendering to the depth of what we shared. His presence enveloped me, his touch claiming me in a way that felt both impossible and inevitable. And in that moment I belonged entirely to the sensations he evoked, lost in a sea of warmth, passion, and the undeniable certainty that this night would stay with me forever. The world beyond us had faded completely, leaving only the hushed intimacy of the room and the heat that radiated between our bodies. Every touch, every movement was deliberate, as though we were painting a masterpiece together, each stroke more exquisite than the last. His hands, sure and warm, moved with a confidence that seemed to anticipate my every need, and I surrendered to their silent command, letting them guide me into uncharted depths. His breath fanned across my skin, hot and uneven, a reflection of the storm brewing within him. I could feel the tension in his body, the way his muscles coiled beneath my fingertips, and it only heightened my own longing. My hands roamed freely now, tracing the broad expanse of his back, lingering at the subtle curve of his spine. His skin was taut, alive under my touch, and every movement of my fingers drew a quiet response, a hitch in his breathing, a shift in his posture, a barely audible hum of approval. The sensations coursing through me were unlike anything I'd known. It wasn't just his touch, though that alone was electric. It was the way he saw me, the way his eyes lingered on mine with an intensity that made me feel as though I were the only thing that mattered. His gaze was both a question and an answer, a connection so profound it left me trembling. He leaned closer, the weight of his body pressing into mine in a way that was grounding and exhilarating all at once. His lips trailed a slow, deliberate path along my jawline, down the curve of my neck, each kiss igniting a fire that spread through me in waves. I arched toward him instinctively, my body responding to his with a yearning I couldn't contain. There was a rhythm to our movements, an unspoken harmony that unfolded naturally, as though we had known each other in this way forever. His hands found my hips, firm yet gentle, and the strength in his grip sent a thrill through me. My skin felt like it was burning, every nerve alive with the sensations he drew from me. Time seemed to stretch and collapse all at once, each moment expanding into infinity, while the minutes slipped away unnoticed. The air was heavy with the mingling of our breaths, the quiet sounds of our shared surrender filling the space between us. The warmth of his body, the weight of his presence, the tenderness in his touch, it was all-consuming, leaving no room for doubt or hesitation. His movements slowed, each touch more deliberate, more reverent, as though he were savoring every second. My fingers found their way to his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw, the curve of his lips, the warmth of his cheek. His eyes met mine, and in that moment I felt utterly exposed, completely vulnerable, and yet more alive than I had ever been. The room around us seemed to pulse with the energy we created, a cocoon of warmth and light that shielded us from the world outside. There was no past, no future, only the present, the shared rhythm of our bodies, the quiet symphony of sensations that bound us together. I closed my eyes, letting myself dissolve into the moment, the barriers between us long since erased. This was more than touch, more than passion. It was a connection so raw, so intimate, that it left me breathless. I could feel his heart beating against mine, steady and strong, and I knew this night would linger in my memory, etched into my very being. Together we were creating something unspoken, something that would remain with us long after the night had faded into dawn. The night deepened, its silence wrapped around us like a velvet shroud, broken only by the sound of our breathing, uneven and mingling in the charged air. The world beyond the room ceased to exist entirely, leaving only the heat of his body against mine, and the shared rhythm that connected us. His hands found new paths, their warmth tracing the curves of my body with a mix of reverence and quiet hunger. Each touch lingered just long enough to awaken something deeper, a need that had been dormant, waiting for this moment to arrive. My skin felt hypersensitive, alive beneath his fingertips as though it had never been touched before. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the sensations he drew from me, my body responding instinctively to the firm press of his palm, the soft graze of his lips. He moved with purpose yet never hurried, as if savoring every second, every reaction. My heart pounded in my chest, its rhythm erratic, matching the intensity of the moment. The feel of his hands on my back, his fingers spreading warmth as they glided over my spine, sent waves of sensation rippling through me. Each stroke was deliberate, as if he sought to memorize every inch of me. His lips followed, leaving a trail of heat that pooled low in my body, an ache that grew with every passing moment. I reached for him instinctively, my fingers slipping across his shoulders, down the length of his arms. His strength was palpable beneath my touch, a quiet power that contrasted with the gentleness of his movements. The expanse of his chest rose and fell beneath my palm, the heat of his skin grounding me as I traced the hard planes and soft edges of him. There was a harmony to our movements, a natural rhythm that unfolded without words, only the language of touch. His lips found the delicate curve of my collarbone, lingering there as though he could feel the flutter of my pulse beneath his mouth. My head tilted back, a soft gasp escaping me, the sensation overwhelming in its simplicity and depth. As he shifted, his body pressing more firmly against mine, I felt the full weight of him, not just his physical presence, but the emotion behind every touch, every glance. It wasn't just passion that burned between us. It was something deeper, something that resonated beyond the surface. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and the firmness of his grip sent a shiver through me. My breath hitched as his touch slid lower, exploring with a tenderness that made my heart ache. I clung to him, my fingers curling into his skin, desperate to anchor myself as I was swept away by the current of sensations he created. Time slipped away, the moments blurring into one continuous wave of heat and connection. His movements slowed, deliberate and unhurried, as though he wanted to stretch the night into infinity. I could feel the weight of his gaze, the intensity in his eyes as they locked onto mine. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a shared understanding that this was ours, a moment suspended in time, untouchable by the outside world. I drew him closer, my hands tracing the familiar yet thrilling lines of his body, the warmth of his skin beneath my fingers a grounding force. The air between us was thick with tension and release, the quiet sound of our shared breaths the only thing tethering me to reality. I had never felt so utterly consumed, so completely alive, as I did in the depths of his embrace. The night was endless, a cascade of sensations and emotions that swept over us in waves. Every touch, every glance, every breath bound us closer together, leaving no room for anything but this moment, this connection that burned with an intensity one would never forget. The quiet enveloped us like a cocoon, the room bathed in a dim glow that seemed to soften every edge, blur every boundary. My senses were heightened, attuned only to him, to the feel of his body beside mine, against mine, around mine. His hand, steady yet searching, trailed along the curve of my shoulder, pausing as if to savor the subtle rise and fall of my breath. Each touch seemed to speak, a silent language etched into my skin. I could feel his presence everywhere, the warmth of him sinking into me as though we shared not just space but something far deeper. His movements were slow, unhurried, each one a deliberate exploration that seemed designed to draw out my every response. When his fingers grazed the inside of my wrist, it felt like an unspoken promise, the tenderness in his touch carrying more weight than any words could have. I let my hand drift upward, finding the line of his jaw. His skin was warm, the stubble rough beneath my fingertips, a contrast that sent a thrill through me. He turned slightly into my touch, his breath fanning over my palm in soft waves. I marveled at the quiet intensity of him, the way his strength was tempered with such care, as though I was something precious. He shifted, and the weight of his body pressed into me, grounding me even as I felt myself dissolving under his touch. His lips found my collarbone, the warmth of his breath a whisper against my skin. Each kiss was slow, deliberate, leaving behind a heat that pooled deep within me, a warmth that seemed to pulse with each beat of my heart. Time moved strangely, stretching and folding in on itself as we lost track of the hours. Every moment felt both infinite and fleeting, each sensation blending into the next until there was nothing but the rhythm of us. His hands on my body, the quiet hum of my pulse, the way we moved together as though we'd always been meant to. His hands traveled lower, their movements firm but unhurried, and I arched instinctively toward him, my body seeking his without thought. His touch was reverent, his fingertips tracing the shape of me as though committing every detail to memory. The warmth of his palms lingered long after they'd moved, leaving trails of fire in their wake. I felt his breath at the nape of my neck, the way it quickened with each shared moment. His hands tightened slightly, a subtle shift that spoke of his restraint, his care. I reached for him in return, letting my hands explore the strength of his shoulders, the tension in his back, the smooth expanse of his chest. There was a softness in the way he held me, but also an intensity, a quiet fervor that made my heart race. The lines between us blurred further, until I could no longer tell where I ended and he began. Each movement was a question and an answer, a give and take that left no space for anything but the fullness of the moment. When our eyes met, it was as though everything stilled. His gaze held mine unflinching, and in that instant I felt completely seen, wholly understood. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only the deep, steady connection of two people lost entirely in each other. His hand found mine, his fingers curling around my palm, anchoring me even as we drifted together into something endless, something unspoken and eternal. Every touch, every breath, every lingering moment felt like a secret, one that would remain etched into my memory long after the night had faded. The boundaries of who I thought I was had melted away, leaving only this, a perfect, unyielding intimacy that I never wanted to let go. The night had settled into a kind of stillness that felt alive, heavy with the echoes of every touch, every whispered breath. His body pressed close to mine, not just a physical presence but an all-encompassing force, grounding me while lifting me to a height I hadn't known was possible. Each movement, every glance was saturated with a depth that transcended the moment. His hand trailed along the curve of my back, the warmth of his palm lingering long after his touch had passed. My skin tingled beneath his fingertips, each caress as deliberate as the last, yet carrying a growing intensity that made my heart race. He explored me as though he were discovering something sacred, his movements unhurried, each one laden with purpose. The softness of his lips found the side of my neck, and I shivered, the sensation sending ripples through me. His breath was warm against my skin, and the quiet hum of it seemed to sync with the rhythm of my own. The way he lingered, the way he paused between each touch, made the moment stretch endlessly. It was as though he wanted to hold on to every second, to etch this into the very fabric of time. I felt his weight shift slightly, his body adjusting to draw me closer, and the firmness of his arms around me was both thrilling and comforting. My hands roamed freely now, tracing the lines of his shoulders, the length of his back, learning the language of him through touch. His strength was tangible beneath my fingertips, but it was the gentleness in his movements that overwhelmed me. The room was steeped in a warmth that had nothing to do with the air, and everything to do with the fire we had ignited. His hands slid lower, their path slow and deliberate, exploring the curve of my hips and the softness of my thighs. The contrast between his steady grip and the delicate way he moved sent a wave of heat through me, a sensation so vivid it left me trembling. I tilted my head back, letting him take me in, and his gaze found mine, unrelenting in its intensity. The connection between us was palpable, unspoken but undeniable, and it stole the air from my lungs. His eyes told me everything I needed to know, that this was real, that I was seen, that I was wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. The night unfolded in layers, each one more profound than the last, until it felt as though nothing existed beyond the space we shared. His hands intertwined with mine, his fingers lacing through mine with a kind of quiet certainty. The simplicity of the gesture belied the power of it, anchoring me in the moment even as the sensations threatened to sweep me away. He leaned closer, his breath mingling with mine, and I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of him envelop me completely. There was no thought of the past, no fear of the future, only the present, rich and consuming, every second more intense than the last. As the moments passed, time seemed to dissolve entirely, leaving only the steady rhythm of our breaths and the quiet symphony of our movements. The way he held me, the way he touched me, felt like an endless promise, one that would linger long after the night gave way to dawn. The boundaries between us had disappeared, leaving only the closeness that bound us together. I felt weightless, lost in the depth of his embrace, the world outside reduced to a distant hum. In that quiet, perfect space, nothing else mattered. There was only him, only this, only us. The first light of dawn began to seep through the edges of the curtains, soft and golden, brushing against the stillness of the room. The warmth of his body lingered against mine, an anchor in a night that felt both infinite and fleeting. My breathing had steadied, though my heart still carried the rhythm of moments that had passed, echoing like a quiet drumbeat beneath my skin. I lay motionless, cocooned in the heat we had created, unwilling to disturb the delicate balance of the space we shared. His arm was draped across me, his hand resting lightly against my waist, its weight grounding me in a way I hadn't known I needed. The rise and fall of his chest against my back was slow and measured, a reminder of the closeness we had forged. Every inch of me seemed alive, my skin tingling with the memory of his touch. It wasn't just the physicality of it, the gentle sweep of his hand, the press of his lips against my throat, but the way he had looked at me, as though he saw something I hadn't shown to anyone in years. That gaze lingered in my mind, a quiet fire that burned even as the night gave way to the soft inevitability of morning. I traced the lines of his forearm with my fingers, marveling at the strength in him, the quiet control he had held throughout the night. The way he moved, the way he touched me. It was as if he had known exactly where to linger, where to press, how to make me feel as though I had been pulled from a dream and placed into something far more vivid, far more real. The faint sound of a bird outside broke the silence, its song weaving into the light as it grew. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds blend into the stillness of the room. I could feel his breath against my shoulder, warm and steady, and I turned slightly, just enough to meet his gaze. His eyes were soft, unguarded, and as they found mine, a slow smile spread across his face, one that sent a flutter through my chest. There were no words spoken, yet the weight of the moment was undeniable. His hand moved, his fingers tracing the curve of my hip with a slowness that made my breath catch. It wasn't with urgency this time, but with a tenderness that felt almost reverent. I leaned into him, my body instinctively seeking the warmth of his, and he responded, his arms pulling me closer. The light in the room grew brighter, illuminating every curve, every line of our intertwined bodies. The quiet intimacy of it all was almost overwhelming, a profound stillness that felt both fragile and unbreakable. My heart swelled with a mixture of emotions I couldn't yet name, a depth of feeling that left me both exhilarated and unmoored. As the moments passed, the reality of the morning began to press softly against us, its weight subtle but persistent. I knew that soon I would have to move, to return to the routine of a life that now felt distant, almost foreign. But for now, I remained still, savoring the lingering heat of his touch, the quiet promise in his gaze. This was a night I would carry with me, etched into my memory as vividly as the warmth of the sun now spilling into the room. It wasn't just the intimacy, the closeness, but the way it had awakened something deep within me, something I thought I had lost. And as I rested against him, his hand still cradling my waist, I felt a quiet certainty. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Like this video and subscribe to Nasty Talks. Don't forget to send this video to your friends on WhatsApp, so they can enjoy it too. Thanks for being here with me.